My name is Corinne Ashford, and I'm 33 years old. 4 nights ago, my boyfriend told me I would make him look unprofessional if I showed up to the biggest presentation of his career. What he didn't say out loud was the part we both knew, that the presentation he was about to give was built on my research, my architecture, my code. I'm a data consultant. I work for a small boutique firm that gets called when bigger companies realize their in-house solution is actually a dumpster fire in a lab coat. I like messy systems and clean outcomes. I like proof, version histories, and timestamps. Feelings are subjective. Data isn't. Ethan, my now ex-boyfriend, but at the time still just Ethan, my partner, works for a mid-sized consulting firm that likes to use words like agile and synergy in its marketing copy. We met at an industry conference. Same field, different scales. He's better at client dinners and handshakes. I'm better at the part where you actually make the numbers behave. We'd been together for about a year and a half, long enough to know each other's coffee orders and therapy triggers, short enough that we were still pretending every compromise was temporary. About 6 months ago, his firm landed a big client, a healthcare company that wanted to overhaul their entire data infrastructure. High budget, high visibility, the kind of project people build promotions and LinkedIn posts around. Ethan was assigned as lead consultant. For him, it was a dream. For his firm, it was a victory. For me, at first, it was just something to celebrate with champagne and smug, "you deserve this" texts. Then the real project showed up. The healthcare company's data was a disaster. Multiple legacy systems duct-taped together. Inconsistent formats. Compliance issues everywhere. Integration nightmares. The kind of thing that looks like an opportunity on a slide and like a horror film once you see the raw tables. Ethan came home tired, shoulders up around his ears. He'd toss his laptop bag down and lean against my kitchen counter like gravity suddenly got heavier. "This project is going to kill me," he said one night, rubbing his eyes. "I'm supposed to be the technical lead, but this is bigger than I expected." "Shane, walk me through it," I said. "You'll feel better if you say it out loud." He did. I listened. I asked questions. I started sketching on a napkin. By the time his takeout was cold, we had the outline of a new architecture that might actually work. "It's good," he said, staring at the mess of arrows and boxes. "Corinne, this is really good." "Then use it," I shrugged. "We can refine it tomorrow." It started like that, a girlfriend lending her brain after hours. No invoices, no contracts, just, "I know this stuff, let me help you." The help grew. Evenings turned into weekends of us huddled over my dining table, laptops open, caffeine levels irresponsible. Ethan would handle the slide decks and status updates. I'd dive into the actual technical solution, data models, integration layers, the compliance framework that kept the whole thing from breaking federal law. He'd pace behind me, hands on his hips. "Can it handle incremental loads if they decide to onboard a new clinic mid-quarter? What about audit trails?" "Yes," I'd say, clicking through my notes. "If we build it this way." I'd write the queries. I'd build the proofs of concept. I'd save every version by date, because that's what I do. It started as consultation. Then it became collaboration. Then, very quietly, it became me doing most of the technical work while he handled client calls and internal politics. I told myself it was fine. I liked the challenge. I wasn't on the hook with his firm. If the politics went sideways, I wasn't the one who'd be in HR's office. And I loved him. Helping him succeed felt like helping us. The first red flag was small enough to ignore. "Internal check-in went great," he said one Thursday, dropping his bag by my door and kissing my forehead. "They love the new architecture direction." "Our architecture," I corrected without looking up from my screen. "Right, our architecture." He laughed, but it was thin. "Obviously, I didn't call it that in the meeting. You know how it is. I'm the one in the room. They need to see me as the technical lead." Something in my chest pinched. "So how did you present it?" "As my proposed solution, but..." He held up his hands when he saw my face. "Corinne, come on. If I start saying my girlfriend built this to my bosses, they'll ask 1,000 questions. Why did I need outside help? Did I misrepresent my skills? Am I delegating core deliverables off the books? It gets messy." "It's the truth," I said. "It's politics," he countered. "I'll make it up to you, okay? When this is over and I get promoted, we'll take a trip, anywhere you want." He meant it as reassurance. It landed like a bribe. I swallowed it. "Fine," I said. "Just Don't forget who designed the thing you're standing on. I won't, he promised. He did. Over the next few weeks, his language shifted. My approach. My methodology. The model I designed. I heard it in the way he recapped meetings, the way he paraphrased praise from his boss, Martin Hale. Martin said I have a real gift for seeing the whole technical picture, Ethan told me one night, rolling his sleeves up in my kitchen, as if the compliment were a badge. He thinks this project could be career-defining for me. I stirred the sauce and pretended my jaw wasn't tight. Did you tell him where the picture came from? He hesitated. It was quick, but I caught it. Not in those words. I said I've had help thinking it through. But not who from. Corinne, what do you want me to say? My girlfriend did the hard parts? Yes, actually, I said a little too quickly. He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're impossible. The thing about being thorough is that you don't have to decide in the moment whether you'll need proof later. You just keep it. Every script, every diagram, every email where I'd send him a model and he'd respond, "This is perfect. I'll present it tomorrow." I hadn't planned to use any of it. I just am who I am. 3 weeks ago, Ethan told me about the big presentation. This is it, he said, dropping onto my couch, laptop balanced on his knees. Final recommendations to the client's executive team and some board members. Friday afternoon. If I nail this, Martin basically has to promote me. He looked excited and terrified at the same time. You'll nail it, I said. You know the material. I know it because you explained it to me, he said, half smiling, half grimacing. That's what scares me. What if they ask something insanely technical, and my brain just empties? You've been living in this architecture for months, I reminded him. You can answer their questions. He bit his lip. Would you? Maybe come, sit in the back? Just knowing you're there would help. Of course, I said. If you want me there, I'll be there. At the time, I believed him. Fast forward to the night before the presentation. Thursday. The sky outside my apartment was ink black by 6. The glow from our screens made the living room feel smaller, like the walls were listening. We were at my dining table, his slide deck open, my notes scattered. I was walking him through the trickiest parts of the integration strategy one more time. I think I'm as ready as I'm going to be, he said, leaning back and cracking his neck. If I see another bullet point, I'll start hallucinating. You're going to be fine, I said. Just remember the story. Messy legacy systems, clean new pipeline, measurable gains. Keep it simple. You know the details if they push. He watched me for a moment. You're still planning to come tomorrow, right? If you want me to, I said. You tell me. He hesitated. I felt it before he spoke, a tiny drop in temperature. Actually, he said slowly, I've been thinking, it might be better if you don't come. I set my pen down. Okay, why? He exhaled, as if I were making this harder than it had to be. You know how you get about technical details. You're enthusiastic. Enthusiastic, I repeated. If you're in the room and I stumble or oversimplify something, you might want to jump in, or I might look at you for backup. And to everyone else, that'll make me look like I don't know my own material. It could undermine my credibility as the lead. I wouldn't interrupt your presentation, Ethan. Not on purpose, he said quickly. I know you'd be trying to help, but perception matters. And if people realize how much help I've had from you, it could make me look less capable, less professional. There it was, not even dressed up nicely. You don't want me at your presentation, I said slowly, because you're afraid someone will figure out I did the work you're about to take credit for. That's not what I said. It's what you meant? He looked away. Corinne, I've worked on this too. I've been the one dealing with the client, managing expectations. And I've been the one building the thing you're selling, I cut in. The architecture, the models, the compliance framework, you know that. Silence stretched between us, tight as a cable. I thought you wanted to help me, he said finally, his voice small in a way that used to make me soften. I did, I said. I do. But there's a difference between helping you and doing your job while you pretend you did it. His jaw clenched. So what? You want me to introduce you to the client as my secret weapon? Hand you the mic in front of my boss and say, surprise, my girlfriend built all this? I want you to stop erasing me, I said quietly. That's all. He shook his head. Just don't come tomorrow. It's safer. For both of us. For both of us, I repeated, tasting the lie. He shut his laptop. I need to sleep. Big day. He kissed my cheek like we hadn't just torn something fundamental. Then he left, the door closing with a soft, final click. The apartment felt wrong after he was gone. Too quiet. The dishwasher hummed in the background. My monitor still showed an open schema diagram. I sat back down at this table, staring at the web of boxes and arrows I'd drawn. The system that would carry his name tomorrow. For the first time since this started, I let myself fully see what was happening. This wasn't support, this wasn't partnership. This was my work, my expertise, wrapped in his name, and he wanted me invisible so no one could see the seams. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it something utilitarian. Healthcare Project Documentation. Then I started gathering everything. I didn't sleep much. I'd like to say I tossed and turned, but mostly I lay on my back, staring at the faint glow of the router in the corner, replaying every sentence Ethan had said. You'll make me look unprofessional. It's safer if you're not there, for both of us. The dishwasher clicked over to off-peak at 12:00 a.m. because months ago I told it to. My systems ran, my code behaved. The only variable out of control was the man who wanted to stand on my work without my name anywhere near it. By morning, something inside me had moved from hurt to clarity. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and opened the folder I'd created the night before. Healthcare Project Documentation. It was all there. Every schema diagram, every set of queries, every architecture draft, from ugly napkin scribble to polished flowchart. Email chains where I'd written, "Here's the revised integration approach. This should solve the audit trail issue." And Ethan had replied, "Perfect. I'll present this to Martin." I hadn't collected it as ammunition. I'd collected it because that's who I am, someone who can tell you exactly when a decision was made and which version of a model fixed which bug. Now, for the first time, I saw it as something else, a record of truth. I started compiling. It took hours, but not because I was disorganized. It took hours because I decided to be meticulous. I grouped everything into sections: technical architecture, integration models, compliance framework, performance analysis. Each file had timestamps. I added a brief explanation at the start of each section, describing what the work represented and how it had evolved. When I was done, I looked at the document. Over 100 pages of proof. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as the question finally formed clearly enough to answer. If Ethan is willing to pretend I don't exist, am I willing to pretend this is okay? No. I opened my email and started a new message. To Martin. Hail at. Subject. Healthcare Infrastructure Project. Technical contribution context. For a long time, the cursor blinked in the empty body of the email. I could hear my heart in my ears. Then I started typing. Martin, I hope this doesn't come across inappropriately, but I wanted to share some information about the Healthcare Data Infrastructure Project before today's presentation. I've been providing significant technical assistance to Ethan on the architecture, models, and compliance framework over the past several months, outside of any formal relationship with your firm. Attached is documentation of my work. This isn't about taking credit away from Ethan, but I believe you should have the full picture of how the technical solution was developed before making decisions about project outcomes or promotions. I'm available to answer questions if needed. Best, Corin Ashford. I reread it 3 times. It didn't sound vindictive. It sounded factual, calm. I attached the file. My hand shook just enough that I had to reposition the mouse. At 9 a.m. I clicked send. The email left my outbox with a soft whoosh I felt in my bones. For the next 2 hours, I existed in a limbo made of notifications that weren't his, promo emails, calendar reminders, a Slack ping from a client about a completely different project. The world went on, unaware that I had just dropped a match into Ethan's carefully built narrative. At 11:07 a.m., my inbox chimed with a new message. From Martin Hale. Subject, Healthcare Infrastructure Project. Technical contribution context. Corinne, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I've reviewed the documentation you attached. Very thorough work. Would you be available to attend the presentation this afternoon, 2:00 p.m. at our downtown office? I think your perspective would be valuable. Best, Martin. I stared at the screen. He didn't sound angry. He didn't sound dismissive. He sounded interested. My fingers moved before my fear could talk me out of it. Yes, I can be there. Corinne. I didn't tell Ethan. If he wanted me invisible, he could enjoy the surprise of my being in the front row. The downtown office looked exactly like the kind of place that needs people like me to fix what's under the hood. Tall glass, polished floors, an elevator that chirped softly as if it had nothing to hide. I arrived at 1:45 p.m., checked in at reception, and received a visitor badge with my name printed in neat, indifferent letters. Ashford Corinne. A young receptionist led me to the executive conference room on the top floor. The door was propped open. Inside, the room climbed upward in shallow tiers of seating, all facing a massive screen at the front. Rows of padded chairs, long tables with power outlets. The air smelled like coffee and expensive ventilation. About 40 people were already there. Ethan's colleagues, client representatives in tailored suits, faces I recognized from the healthcare company's leadership page. A few people who radiated board member energy. Near the middle of the front row, Martin Hale sat with a tablet in front of him. Late 40s, careful posture, the kind of calm you only get from handling crises for a living. When he saw me, he stood and leaned slightly forward over the table. "Corinne?" he said. "Yes," my voice came out steadier than I felt. "Thank you for coming." His tone was neutral in the way that made me think he was actively choosing every word. "Please, have a seat." He gestured to an open chair in the front row, a few seats away from him. It was a position that said guest, but also witness. I sat, placed my laptop on the table, and opened the documentation file I'd sent him. The diagrams and code stared back at me, oddly comforting. If anyone nearby glanced over, they'd see exactly what this was, the technical architecture for the project they were about to hear about. At 1:55 p.m., the room shifted. Voices softened. People straightened in their chairs. Ethan walked in. He was in his best Navy suit, the one I'd helped him choose for serious meetings. His tie was knotted perfectly. Under the fluorescent lights, he looked polished, confident, the version of himself he liked best. He was laughing at something a colleague said when he stepped up to the front of the room. He set his notes on the podium, exhaled, and turned toward the audience with his practice presentation smile. Then he saw me. It was instantaneous. His eyes landed on my face, then dropped to my laptop screen, then flicked to Martin, sitting a few seats away. All the color drained from his face, his smile faltered, then tried to reassemble itself and failed. I watched the exact moment he understood that the ground under his feet had changed. "Hi, everyone," he began. His voice cracked on the second word. He cleared his throat, forcing casualness. "Thanks for coming today. I'm going to present our final recommendations for the Healthcare Data Infrastructure Project." He looked at me again, just a flicker, but desperate. I kept my expression neutral. Over the past 6 months, he launched into his script. "My team and I have been working on—" He stopped. His eyes dropped once more to my open laptop. I saw the recognition. Diagrams he'd presented, models he'd claimed, all under my name. Martin stood. "Ethan," he said calmly, "before you begin, I think we need to clarify something about the project's technical development." The room went very still. Every head turned toward Martin, then toward Ethan. You could feel the mood shift from routine presentation to something else, something people would be talking about later in low voices. "This morning," Martin continued, "I received documentation from Ms. Ashford here." He gestured to me, showing extensive technical contributions to the architecture and models you're about to present, contributions that haven't been previously disclosed. His gaze stayed steady on Ethan. "Can you explain the nature of her involvement?" Silence pressed against my ears. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. "Corinne is my girlfriend," he said finally, his voice smaller now. "She's helped me, think through some of the technical aspects, just informal support." "Some?" Martin repeated, glancing down at his tablet. "According to these records, she developed the core data architecture, created the integration models, wrote the compliance framework, and produced the performance analyses. In other words, the technical solution you're about to present as your own." A ripple moved through the room, shifts in chairs, exchanged glances, one quiet wow, quickly suppressed. "I manage the project," Ethan said quickly. "I've been handling the client relationship, the internal coordination, and that's important," Martin said. "But we have a serious issue if an outside party not employed by our firm developed core deliverables for a client project without our knowledge, contracts, or IP agreements." He let that hang in the air. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady on the laptop. Ethan's eyes found mine again, and this time there was accusation in them, like I was the one who'd dragged him onto thin ice instead of just refusing to drown quietly under it. "You sent him that file," he said, not really a question. "I did," I answered. "Why?" The word came out like an accusation and a plea tangled together. "Because you asked me to stay away," I said evenly. "Because you told me I'd make you look unprofessional if anyone realized how much of this work came from me." I decided Martin deserved to know whose solution he was about to hang his firm's reputation on. That's not fair, he snapped, panic bleeding through his composure. We collaborated. You never called it that in your meetings, I cut in. My voice was calm, but inside I felt something sharp and clean, like the edge of a decision. You took my models and called them your methodology. You took my analyses and called them your insight. That isn't collaboration, Ethan. That's plagiarism with better lighting. A few people in the second row looked anywhere but at us, the way bystanders do when they know they're watching something intimate and ugly. Martin cleared his throat. We'll need to pause here, he said, addressing the room. Given what's come to light, this presentation is postponed until we've had time to fully review the situation. He turned back to the audience of executives and board members. Thank you all for coming. We'll reschedule once we've clarified the project's development and IP status. Chairs scraped back. People began to stand, some annoyed, others clearly intrigued. Conversations broke out in low, buzzing clusters. As the room emptied, Martin walked over to me. Ms. Ashford, he said quietly, thank you for coming forward. Would you be willing to stay for a meeting with me, Ethan, our legal counsel, and HR to discuss this in more detail? Yes, I said, I'm willing. Ethan just stared at me as the last of the executives filed out, like he was trying to memorize the face of the person who had just rearranged his entire career trajectory. The truth was, I'd simply stopped letting him edit me out of the story. The walk from the conference room to the smaller executive meeting room felt like the longest, quietest hallway in the world. Ethan trailed a few steps behind me, as if unsure whether standing closer would make him look guiltier or more betrayed. He kept opening his mouth like he wanted to whisper something, but every time he caught sight of Martin or the HR rep walking ahead, he closed it again. The meeting room door clicked shut behind us. Inside, a long glass table, 4 chairs on each side, a pitcher of water with glasses no one touched. The legal counsel already waiting, flipping through a printed version of my documentation. I took a seat on the left side. Ethan sat across from me. Martin sat at the head. His posture was calm, but his eyes were alert, calculating. All right, Martin said, folding his hands. Let's understand the scope of this. He nodded toward me. Corinne, could you walk us through your involvement in the project from the beginning, in your own words? I opened my laptop, hands steady. Of course. And then I did what I do best. I explained. I walked them through the first model I helped Ethan sketch on a napkin, the one he'd presented internally as his new conceptual framework. I pulled up the initial architecture diagrams, my diagrams, showing how the legacy systems could be reorganized without breaking compliance protocols. I showed timestamps, version histories, code comments in my voice, emails where Ethan had said, "This is exactly what I needed. I'll share this with the team tomorrow." Every piece landed with quiet weight. Halfway through, Ethan leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. She's making it sound like she did everything, he said, his voice too loud in the small room. That's not what happened. Martin's gaze shifted to him. Then explain what did happen. Ethan looked between us, between the evidence in front of him and the expressionless legal counsel beside Martin. It was partnership, he insisted. We were, together. We've been working on this side by side for months. She's incredibly capable, and I relied on her. Yes, but I presented the work. I handled the client. I led the meetings. She's acting like she single-handedly built the entire system. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Ethan, I said, you brought me your client's entire infrastructure problem and asked for help. You didn't delegate. You offloaded. Every technical component you presented was something I designed. You know that. His jaw clenched. I never said it was my work alone. You never said it wasn't, I replied evenly. Martin exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. The legal counsel finally looked up from her stack of papers. Her voice was sharp and clinical. Let's be very clear about something. If Ms. Ashford created any portion of the core deliverables and she is not an employee, contractor, or approved vendor for this firm, we have a significant IP breach. She glanced at Ethan. Did you disclose her involvement to anyone at any time? Ethan swallowed. I told my team I had help thinking through some concepts. But you did not disclose that she developed the technical architecture, models, or compliance framework, she said, not asking, stating. He went quiet. Here's the problem, the legal counsel continued. If Corinne owns the IP for these components, then your firm cannot legally present or use them. If you implied or stated that you created them, that's misrepresentation. Both scenarios expose us to risk. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, pleading now, not angry. Corinne, you're not trying to ruin my career, he said, voice trembling just slightly. "We talked about this. You wanted to help me succeed." "I did," I said softly. "But helping you succeed is not the same as letting you take ownership of what I built." He flinched. Martin leaned forward. "Corinne," he said, "I need to understand your intentions. What do you want here? Are you seeking recognition, compensation, legal action, a role at our firm, something else?" Everyone's eyes turned to me. For a moment, the room felt very small. "I'm not looking to embarrass anyone," I said, "and I'm not looking for revenge. I sent the documentation because I believed you should know what you were about to put your company's name on. Ethan has been using my work as his foundation. That's not sustainable or honest." Martin nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The legal counsel tapped her pen. "Given the scope of your contribution, one solution is that we purchase the IP rights from you." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "Wait, what?" She continued without looking at him. "We would compensate you appropriately, obtain full rights to the work, and draft an NDA to protect all parties. That would allow us to continue the project without legal risk." Martin glanced at me. "Is that something you'd consider?" I didn't look at Ethan. His panic wasn't my responsibility. "Yes," I said, "depending on the compensation." A pause. Then negotiation began. It lasted 30 minutes. Legal counsel opened with a lowball figure, professional, but still an insult. I countered. Martin raised the offer. We circled each other through numbers and justification, through ownership clauses and deliverable breakdowns. Ethan watched the back and forth like someone witnessing a slow-motion car crash, unable to look away. Finally, Martin sat back. $75,000, he said. Full IP rights and an NDA preventing disclosure of the situation, including any internal or personal details. We'll also provide written acknowledgement that you were a technical contributor, though that acknowledgement remains internal. It was fair, clean, more than I expected, less than what my pride whispered I deserved, but enough that I could feel my future tilt into new shape. "I agree," I said. The legal counsel nodded, sliding forms across the table. As we signed, Ethan stared at the contract, at the line item for compensation, like it was written in a language he'd never seen before. "You're really doing this," he whispered. I closed the pen. "No," I said quietly. "You did this. I'm finishing it." He looked shattered, lost, furious at himself, but reaching for someone else to blame. The meeting ended. Papers gathered. A polite round of thank yous from Martin and legal. Chairs pushed back. The reality of consequences settling like dust over the room. As we walked out, Ethan reached for my arm. "Corinne, please, can we talk?" But there was nothing left to say. I stepped back. He let his hand drop. Martin watched the exchange with a solemn, unreadable expression. "Corinne," he said, "if you'd ever like to consult with us formally, please reach out. Your work is excellent." "Thank you," I said, "but not right now." I walked out of the building into the late afternoon sun. It felt different on my skin than it had when I arrived. Cleaner. Sharper. My phone buzzed once. A text from Ethan. "Please don't leave." I locked the screen without opening it. Some decisions don't need further explanation. 6 weeks later, the dust had settled, but nothing had landed where it used to be. Ethan wasn't fired. I'd never wanted him to be, but he was removed from the healthcare project immediately. His promotion, the one he'd practically taste-tested in his mind, was quietly canceled. He was reassigned to mid-tier internal work under closer supervision. The kind of supervision you give someone when you're waiting to see if they crumble or learn. His reputation didn't implode, but it bruised, deeply. People in his firm didn't confront him. They whispered. Averted eyes in hallways. Longer delays in email responses. Team leads who accidentally forgot to loop him into strategy calls. Career injuries rarely bleed. They just ache. We lasted 3 more days after the meeting. 3 days of conversations that weren't really conversations, just the same 2 sentences in different shapes. "You betrayed me. You erased me." He tried every angle. Anger, apology, denial, logic, tears. He said I blindsided him, that I humiliated him, that I weaponized our relationship. He said he only hid my involvement to protect us from messy corporate lines, that I should have trusted him, that I should have waited until after the presentation, after the promotion, after he was stable. I asked him the same question every time. Why were you only willing to acknowledge me once you got what you wanted? He never had an answer. On the last night, he came to my apartment after work. He didn't knock like usual. His hand barely brushed the door before I opened it. He looked exhausted, suit wrinkled, tie loosened, like a man who had been rearranged by forces he wasn't strong enough to name. "Corinne, he began, voice raw. I know I messed up. I know I didn't handle things right, but what you did. I told the truth, I said gently. You didn't just tell the truth, he said, frustration cracking through. You burned down the room. No, I said, meeting his eyes. I walked into the room you built on my work and I opened the curtains. He flinched. You could have talked to me, he said quietly. Before you went to Martin, you could have given me that chance. I tried, I said, for months. Every time I asked you to acknowledge what I was doing, you minimized it. You said it was politics. You said it was complicated. You told me to stay away so nobody would figure out the truth. That wasn't protecting me. It was protecting the story you wanted to tell. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wet at the corners. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said, but you did. Silence settled between us. Heavy, final. Finally, he whispered, so that's it? We're done? I felt the grief rise in me, real grief, the kind that has weight and warmth and history. Yes, I said, we're done. He nodded slowly, like someone trying to memorize the moment they lost something important. Then he left. He didn't look back. I didn't call after him. Sometimes closure is quiet. Life didn't snap back into place immediately. Breakups leave a messy, psychic residue. Pictures on your phone you forgot to delete, a shirt left in the back of the drawer, half-remembered routines that suddenly feel strange without a second toothbrush beside yours. But the air slowly thinned around me. I could breathe again. A week later, Martin emailed to ask if I wanted to consult for their firm officially. It was a generous offer, one that would have made sense financially and professionally. I declined. The entire situation left a taste in my mouth that felt like metal, sharp, unpleasant, lingering. I wanted space from anything connected to the project, or to Ethan, or to the version of me who minimized her own value to preserve someone else's comfort. I funneled the NDA money into my savings, paid off a lingering student loan, and took 3 days off to do nothing but sleep and walk and let my brain rest from months of carrying 2 jobs and someone else's ego. 2 weeks after the breakup, I met someone new. Not romantically at first, just a good conversation at a data science meetup. His name is Daniel, a data analyst from a different sector. Kind eyes, dry humor, the quiet sort of confidence that doesn't require an audience. When things between us started shifting, slowly, naturally, we agreed on one rule. We do not collaborate on work, not even small things, not even opinions on architecture, not even, hey, can you look at this real quick? Professional and personal stay separate, completely. I learned the hard way that helping someone succeed should never mean becoming invisible in the process. It took me a while to admit this to myself, but here is the quiet truth. If Ethan had acknowledged me, just once, none of this would have happened. Not the email, not the meeting, not the NDA, not the breakup. All he had to say was, Corinne helped me build this. I couldn't have done it without her. But he chose ambition over honesty, image over integrity, ownership over partnership. He wanted a career-defining victory. He got a career-defining lesson instead. And me? I got something better than a promotion or praise or credit. I got myself back.